Well, good morning. How are you all today? Welcome to Integrative Preparedness. Happy Sunday. It is a beautiful day here, nice and cool and a little bit overcast. And I am looking at a bunch of tomatoes behind you, right over there, that need to be picked. So I'll do some of that today. We had our oldest's birthday party yesterday, family get together. That was nice. And today we're going to be working on the new patio. So it's a good day. But I want to talk about today why you need to carry a gun. Okay, I've touched on this a little bit before, but I want to touch on it more. Just another story about a guy that I read this morning. Some big guy, I don't know, he was a competitive cyclist or and hockey player and all that, and he was out and saw a homeless guy giving a ration to a woman and her kid, and stepped in to stop this homeless guy harassing him, and the homeless guy stabbed him in the neck, killed him. That's on the heels of a lot of these attacks that we've talked about lately. The one in where the fourth grade school teacher jumped out on the path down in Arkansas and killed those two people. Probably after they're young girls, because the guy was obviously a pervert. Then what was the other one? The guy whose daughter and he were attacked while they were camping by those four animals down there. Where'd that happen? That happened another place. It was just I don't remember, but it was another situation where I say you cannot think that there's any safe place in the world. Okay, rural areas aren't safe. Small towns a little bit safer because there's more people around, but the more isolated you get, it's up to you to be prepared to provide your own safety and security. And then, of course, that situation down in Cincinnati, to where the man or two men and a woman were street stomped down there, in which a gun could have been used in any number of ways. You don't always have to shoot a gun to use it effectively. And I just saw that one of some councilwoman, I think it was, who came out and said, well, they were begging for that beating, and I'm glad that it happened. Okay, this leads into something that I'm going to talk about on a future video, and that is why America is collapsing and what you need to be ready for. And I don't think there's any turning back from it. But you need to be ready. There's only two reasons not to carry a gun. The first is that you don't believe you live in a world where that's necessary, in which case you're incredibly naive. And I say that not meaning to be mean, but I'll tell you a short story about a friend of mine, a good friend of mine. Great guy. He's in his 70s. Okay, experienced person, retired prosecutor. It took me 3 or 4 years to convince him to buy a gun. Now here's a guy. Now granted, he was a prosecutor. He wasn't a prosecutor from a large county or a city or anything like that. He was county prosecutor for a small county in Kansas. Small towns, small counties, and there's safety out there. And more than, well, there's not so much safety, there's the illusion of safety. But being a prosecutor and being a lawyer, you would have thought that he would have an understanding of the dangers of the world, right? Well, it took me several years to convince him to buy a gun, and I still don't think he carries. But finally it came down to, he kept resisting, and finally he said, Steve, I think the reason that I don't get one is that I just don't want to admit that I live in a world in which that is necessary. Well, he finally did buy one. Okay, so that's the first thing. Either you're incredibly naive about the world, you know, and if you live around me, you're never gonna, you know, well, I was gonna say you're never gonna be called on to pull it or to use your weapon around here, but I live in one of the safest areas in the country, and a police officer was killed about half a mile north of here several years ago. Stopped the car. The guy was you know what he was? He wasn't a dirtbag in the eyes of most people. He was a financial advisor. Who knows what was going on with him? Had a bad day, lost a lot of money, off his psych meds, who knows? But the officer pulled him over, and for nothing more than a traffic violation. And the guy pulls a gun, shoots the cop. You never know what's going to. It came into the officer was able to respond and killed him too, but that didn't save the officer. Those kinds of attacks happen occasionally with police, but not usually with citizens. Okay. So that's one thing. Either, but if you live in a safe area like me, you still go other places. If you live in a small town, you still go other places, right? I go places to where, you know, it's not all that safe, unless you're just going to hide in a cave. Life is going to call on you to go other places. Okay, and you never know what's going to happen. You know, one of the things that I say all the time is anything can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. The other reason to not carry is that you will not accept responsibility for your own safety and security. I know Uncle Steve tells it straight, doesn't he? And it hurts people's feelings sometimes. Not my intention. My intention is to get you to think about things in the proper way. So that's it. A person who will not carry, if it's not that they're naive, it's because they won't accept responsibility for their own safety. Let me go further with this. They also won't accept responsibility for the safety of those who depend on them, meaning their wife, their children, their husband, you know, whatever, or their children. They won't accept. Now think about what that means. They will not accept responsibility for the safety and security of those who depend on them. That is a hard pill to swallow, but it's the pill of truth, right? Okay. And if you want to take that further, they also won't accept responsibility for helping others whose path they may cross when the other person is in danger of death or physical harm. Those are the only two reasons not to carry. Only two reasons. Oh, I know there are some that say, well, for religious reasons I don't do that. Well, Jesus told his disciples to buy swords. So that's out the window. Okay, that is no excuse. And I can't wait for the person to come on and tell me how I misunderstand that verse, because I will come back and give you a complete answer on why you do. Oh man. Well, no, I'm not going to get on that. Let me tell you a story of something that happened 5-6 years ago when I was still at the hospital. And a guy, nice kid, big guy. He was probably 26 years old, something like that. 6'4", looked like he spent all his time in the gym. And he was married, had a young kid. And there was a number of us that were always in the ER, and we'd be back in the galley drinking coffee, and we'd be talking about things because, a lot of them knew that I had written the books, the Stone Mount series. And so we were always talking about, preparedness and guns and things like that. And so he came up to me one time, and he never participated in the conversations. But I was back there getting a cup of coffee. It was just me back there, and he kind of came back, and it was just the two of us. And he says, "Hey, I want to ask you a question." I said, "Yeah, well." He says, "Do you think I should have a gun?" And I said, "Well, I think everybody should have a gun. I think everybody should carry. Everybody who's not a nutcase should carry a gun." And he thought about that for a minute. You could tell that there were wheels going on in his head. He was trying to process this, right? And he said, well, do you always carry a gun? I said, well, yeah, I always carry a gun. I've carried a gun for 50 years. Well, at that point, it was more like 45 years. He said, well, how much does your gun weigh? And I said, well, I don't know. I never weighed my gun. I don't really care. And I know that there are people out there. Beware of these people, because these aren't people you should listen to. There are people out there who make gun videos, and they'll tell you how this one weighs 5 ounces more than this other one, or this one is 7 ounces less, so you're more likely to carry it. That's the biggest idiocy there is. Hopefully I'll remember to explain that in a moment. I don't know how much it carries. He said, well, does it weigh like a pound or 2 pounds or 3 pounds? I said, I don't know. I don't have any idea. I just, I carry it. I don't care how much it weighs. Well, he says, I just don't know if, he kept coming up with excuses and all about how much it weighs. And, isn't it hard to carry it? And I said, well, when you first start carrying a gun, and I started carrying a gun, daily when I got out of the police academy. And it's something that most people go through when they start carrying regularly, or always. And that is, you're a little bit self-conscious. You are very conscious of it, right? You're conscious of the weight. You're conscious. New people have a tendency to always be touching their gun, and is it shifting, or blah 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 blah. And you just know that the whole world knows that you're carrying a gun. Nobody knows. And you'll hear people talk also about how to carry best concealed and all that. Well, and the best holster, inside waistband, outside waistband, position, appendix, all this. That's a bunch of junk. Most of that's for people who never carried professionally. And I'll tell you what, I learned more about carrying a gun when I was undercover than I ever did in uniform. And I've made videos on that, but maybe I'll do another one on that. But so I told him, I said, well, you just get used to it, right? At first you're self-conscious, but you get used to it. And I think everybody should carry a gun, because he said, well, I just don't know if I want to do that or not. And I said, well, do you not feel that you're responsible for your wife and your kid? I said, you got a kid, right? He said, yeah. Don't you feel like you're responsible? My dog's back here looking for something. You feel like you're responsible? Oh, yeah. I mean, I'd do anything for him. Okay, well, you do anything for him. Do you feel like, that you may need to protect them sometimes? He said, well, I don't know, maybe. I said, well, the maybe, just think about, what if the maybe happens and you aren't able to protect him? Well, I'd do everything I could. Well, okay. You do everything you can, right? Just like these people on the path down there. I'm sure they did everything they could to survive, and still the guy killed them both. I'm sure that the father and daughter who were attacked by the 4 people while they were camping, I'm sure he did everything he could. Still got his throat cut. He's going to be in the hospital for a long time. Luckily, he'll survive. His daughter fought him off, apparently, with a knife. But, injuries were sustained. What are you looking at, buddy? What are you going after? Man, he is after something. I'll go over there and check when I'm done with talking with you all. I'm sure that this guy who tried to protect the woman and her kid from the homeless guy, I'm sure he did everything he could. And everything that they could do wasn't enough, because they didn't have a gun. And so I explained to this guy, well, you say that you'll do everything, you'll do anything possible to protect your wife and kid, but you seem resistant to carrying a gun, which is the main thing of being able to protect them in any situation. And he just kept on like that. And finally he got upset, and he said, well, I just don't I just don't want to have to carry a gun every day for the rest of my life. And I thought to myself, I was pretty much disgusted with him by this time. But I said, what an idiotic thing to say. What an idiotic thing to say. Realize what that means. Well, I don't want, I want to say that I'm responsible for my own safety and the safety of my wife and kids, but I don't want to really have to be responsible. Not every day, maybe just some days, right? But not every day. That's like saying, well, I don't mind, buying them food sometimes, but not every day. I don't mind, letting them live in a house, every now and then, but not every day. I don't want to pay for a house, for them to live in. I don't want to, I don't want to have them have clothes every day. It's just the same thing. And I said, well, yeah, okay. You know what he said then? He said, but I'm glad there's people like you who do, so that the rest of us will be safe. And I thought, if that wasn't the biggest pud answer I have ever heard, and I thought, what in the hell has happened to men, to young men, to American young men? I see that there is a big difference in generations. It doesn't mean that there weren't some idiots in my generation and there aren't some great people in the younger generations. Both are true. But men of my age were raised with action movies, with cowboy movies, with war movies, and stuff like that. And it was all about, for the most part, some of the greatest Western movies or TV shows. Lone Ranger, Cheyenne, all these kinds of things. I love those. It was usually about one man standing up against evil. It could be one other man who was evil. It could have been a group. High Noon is a great lesson. And so a lot of us, we were steeped in that. And it was reinforced by our fathers. And then, the movies changed, society changed, and, people even 20 years younger than me, they weren't watching Clint Eastwood movies. They weren't watching Billy Jack, they were watching, the slacker movies, Fast Times at Ridgemont High or whatever that was. They started watching all the funny movies. And I think a lot of that took away a lot of the expectations of manhood. But for whatever reason, I'm not going to I could go down that road for a long time, right? But those are the two reasons, the only two reasons why people don't carry. Either they're incredibly naive, or they refuse to accept responsibility for their own safety and the safety of those who depend on them. So I want to ask you, if you don't carry, now those of you who do carry, you already know all this, right? So this question isn't for you, but I suggest, I invite you to put your comments in. Go ahead and put your comments in for the people who may not carry to read. If you don't carry, which one of those applies to you? Are you incredibly naive about the world, that you bury your head in the sand? You don't want to admit that you live in a world, or I guess that first one could be broken down to either you're incredibly naive or you refuse to accept reality. Okay. So is that you, or are you one who refuses to accept responsibility for their own safety and the safety of those who depend on you, leaving it up to other people? Be that police or maybe a good Samaritan that might come along and save your family when it should be you doing it, right? Which do either of those apply to you? If they don't, then what the heck is stopping you from carrying? And if they do, ask yourself, is that something that you're proud of? Is that a way you want to continue to live? To leave it up to strangers to protect you and your family? We're seeing a lot of these stories come out, right? A lot of these attacks. All of these attacks could have been handled immediately and effectively with a handgun. Simple as that. You decide what you want to do, but realize that what you do reflects on what and who you are. Remember that we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow. Get out there and do something positive. Be responsible for your own welfare and your own safety, and the safety and welfare for those who depend on you. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.